So hi, good evening everyone. So welcome everyone to Microsoft ID Pro, our system. And today we have our Sheik from Digital team, service delivery engineer, A1 Technologies. So Sheik, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for attending the session today after probably a busy day of work or uni or wherever it may be. I really appreciate you taking your time to commit your time after in the evening hours to this session. So today we are going to talk about how Microsoft Entra ID as an identity control plane is very important or used in modern organizations. Um, and we'll also discuss how we can apply zero trust principles and controls on the organizations and how we can strengthen the governance and also improve the security posture of the modern organizations using Microsoft Entra ID. So before I start, let me just ask a couple of questions. Just raise your hand if you have access the Microsoft Entra ID portal. Anyone? Okay. So how many of you have admin access on Microsoft Entra ID portal? Okay, perfect. Now let me give you a scenario. Imagine of a scenario where your organization's global admin account is compromised. Can your firewall protect it? Can the organization's network protect it? Can it? Or rather, would the person who compromised the account would have the keys to the kingdom, which is your organization? What would it be? What would be the answer? In the modern setup, neither your firewall, neither your network can control identity theft or identity compromise. If someone has access to your global admin or compromise your global admin, he would have kingdoms and unlimited control over your organization and can do all kind of stuff if you are familiar with admin controls. And before we start, let me give you a quick introduction of myself. My name is Sheik, and I work as a service delivery engineer at A1 Technologies through Digital team. A1 Technologies is an Australian MSP. We work on medium-sized businesses, and I specialize in Microsoft 365, Azure, Intune, Microsoft Defender, Purview, you name it, like the whole stack. So my day-to-day work involves heading the security hardening for new organizations, applying the Microsoft best practices and controls on the organizations, and then head the technical aspects of onboarding new clients into our organization. And I have been a Microsoft trainer since 2022, and I've had the privilege to or the opportunity to have training sessions, conduct training sessions on mostly Microsoft 365, Defender, and Entra to audience around the globe. And I have also had the opportunity to attend Microsoft events and MCT summits and meet some wonderful people who are subject matter experts, MVPs, fellow MCTs, you name it. That's a really good experience. And I'm also certified across Microsoft Security, Azure, M365, modern workplace and identity technologies. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. And if you are not connected on LinkedIn with me, just scan the QR code. I'm happy to get connected and answer if you have any questions. So why does identity security matter? Why is it so prominent now? Why is it so important? So before I get into any of the principles or the theory side of things, let me just ask you a simple question. What stops a stolen password making that a successful login? assume someone has your username and the password, right? And what can stop the user or the attacker accessing that account? What would stop it? It's a very straightforward. Sorry? MFA. Yes. MFA is what? MFA is Microsoft Security Control. So a password is not the only security measure that we should use in the Microsoft ecosystem. A password can be stolen, a password can be phished, a password can be sprayed, reused. You have all kind of things. A correct username and a password should not be the only measure to decide whether it is a successful authentication or not. It was the practice before, like maybe 10 years ago, before COVID, when everything was inside an office network, but that's not the case anymore. So in today's session, I'm trying to cover these security best practices, Microsoft concept, etc., and the Enter controls, and we'll also go through on Microsoft solutions for these, like MFA, conditional access, PIM, which is privileged identity management, identity protection, and governance, etc. So the key takeaway from this slide is what you should understand or realize is that unlike the previous years or unlike before, most breaches do not start with someone breaking through your firewall or your network. It always happens through a compromised identity. That is the key takeaway from today's session, if I tell you. So the previous scenario that I explained, what if the global administrator of your organization is compromised? A global administrator, okay, let me ask you a question. What kind of controls does a global administrator have? If someone could answer. Hmm. Yes, so in simple, that's correct. So in simple terms, global administrator is like a super user. A global administrator does not have all the controls to everything, but has majority of the control. So a global administrator can reset passwords for the users and the admins. They can create new admin accounts. They can disable MFA like for the whole organization if they want. And they can modify conditional access policies. Let's say, for an example, you have a conditional access policy in your organization that requires MFA for all users. You can just go and disable it, and no MFA is required anymore. So it's pretty critical. And once someone has access to the global administrator, all your business critical data, sensitivity data, and all your IP is exposed because he has access to Exchange, all your mailboxes, he has access to SharePoint, all the SharePoint sites and team sites or whatever sits there, and your Teams and your OneDrive, you name it, he has access to the whole Microsoft ecosystem. And also, they can grant themselves additional permissions, like, say, for an example, a global administrator does not have full control over something like Microsoft Purview. So you need certain additional controls as well. So as long as you have global administrator permissions, all these can be done. So imagine if that compromised user account is a global administrator account, how critical or how dangerous would that be? So when a global administrator account, for an example, is compromised, it is not an IT problem anymore. It is a business critical, business wide problem, because your data gets exposed across Microsoft. Whatever the data that sits on Microsoft 365 gets exposed. You don't know what even the compromised person does that. Security controls may be disabled or bypassed. So whatever the security controls that you have in your organization can be disabled or bypassed. And also business interruption. And also it hurts or it damages your compliance, your risk, financial risk, and also your reputation. Imagine if someone gets to know that your organization's global administrator gets breached. Imagine the reputation damage, it takes place. So which is why I just gave this as an example why account compromise or account security is very important in the Microsoft ecosystem in the current world. So in terms of the session flow, we'll go through these important factors. The first one being the perimeter is gone. We'll go through how it is not how it's used to be, like how the previously, like the office network or the office firewall protected everything, and if you were within the office network, everything was assumed to be secured. That's not the case anymore. And zero trust mindset. Zero trust is the basis of the Microsoft security ecosystem. So we'll check on zero trust as well. And then we'll check on Entra ID control plane, and we'll check on what components are there in Entra ID and what kind of function it helps the whole Microsoft security ecosystem. And then we will move on to conditional access, whereas all the work or the practicality is applied on Microsoft Entra ID through conditional access policies. And then we'll also look at attack scenarios, a few attack scenarios like the very common ones, and we'll move on to recognizing what an identity estate is, as in like what an identity ecosystem is. And finally, we'll check on the governance, the best practices, what we should do to avoid or prevent the damaged reputation. And also finally, the future or what it looks like for the identity security. Right. The traditional perimeter is gone. So the network is no longer your trusted boundary. So if you have worked in an organization, let's say 12 to 15 years ago, it was a very simple setup. You had your office, you had your network, you had your firewall to protect your inbound and outbound connections. And if a user was within that network, it was assumed that the user was protected or user was secure. And if you had a VPN connection, if you rarely works outside of the office, it was assumed to be a secure connection. But that is the old assumption. That was long way ago. So, and also the last one, login once, trust for session. So back in the day, there were like no session controls. If you logged in once, you are trusted for as long as the browser is open, as long as you're logged in. There's no control to control if this connection should be disconnected. Once you're logged in, you're logged in for however long that the connection is active. But the modern reality is different. It's not the case anymore, especially after COVID. So users work from anywhere. Users work from airports. Users work from shared workspaces. Users work from home. Users work from the most trendy one. Users work from the coffee shops now. So users work from everywhere. It used to be just the office, but now the users work from typically everywhere. And your applications and SaaS is cloud hosted. If you worked sometime back, like 10, 15 years ago, none of the applications were in cloud. All the applications were restricted or bound within the office network. You can't just go outside and log in to a computer and access your office applications. So it was supposed to be within a perimeter network, but it's not the case anymore. Everything is in the cloud. And devices are mixed and mobile. What I mean by is that back in the days, you had your desktop. Maybe occasionally the VIP users had a laptop. That's about it. Now, your desktop, laptops, mobile devices, tablets, you name it, you connect to your organization within all kind of devices. And also finally, data is used to be accessed by users most of the time previously. Now it's the human users and agents as well. You have all these AI agents and all those integrations, and you have all kind of identities accessing data. So the takeaway from this slide is if the network is not the perimeter, identity becomes a control point. We can't control the whole world or the network that the user connects to, but we can connect the identity. As long as we have controls over the identity, we can, I wouldn't say it's 100% secure, but that's a step that we take towards security. Right, let me just take you through demo on what looks like. So this is your Microsoft 365 homepage. So I believe almost everyone must have accessed this. So if you see, all your critical applications or essential applications can be accessed through cloud. You have your OneDrive, you have your SharePoint, you have your Outlook, you have your Teams and Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you name it. And depending on the license, you will have access to whatever the application is available here. So what I'm trying to say here is that anything can be accessed through cloud. So how does the cloud access it? It's based on the identity. And then we will just see what is available in the Microsoft Entra ID uh, center, because this is the control plane where all the theories, all the practices are being applied. So if you see, if you are familiar with Entra ID or not, you have your users. If you go to users, you'll have your internal users, guests, all kind of users. And you will have your groups. You will have your Microsoft 365 groups. You will have your security groups, mail-enabled security groups, and whatnot. And you will also have the visibility for devices. So this is just a demo tenant, so you won't have your devices. But in a production environment, this would list all kinds of devices that is connected to your tenant. It could be your laptop, desktop, Android phone, iPhone, tablet, you name it, whatever. And then you have your agents as well. This is something new, so you will have all your AI agents displayed here as well. So this is just to give you an idea that Microsoft Entra ID has all these components within it. So the security of an identity which connects to the Microsoft Entra ID portal as critical as much. And that's just a go through of the um, Entra ID portal. Let me just show you something else as well. So sign-in logs. Sign-in logs is the context. So if you could raise your hand who are familiar with sign-in logs. Anyone from this side? Okay. What does sign-in log means? Like, what does it contain? What does it say? What's the use of a sign-in log? Yeah, so a sign-in log is the context. So it gives you all kinds of information of a user session. So if I click on one of these, uh, it has pretty much all information that is related to a user. What kind of user this is, the username, the user ID, what the owner tenant is, and what kind of protection is being used, and stuff like location. Where is this user connected from? What the IP address is, or is there any global secure access used? And then if you go to device information, you have your device, the browser, the operating system, etc. And if you get into the authentication details, it will display if there has been any authentication failures or success logs. And if you go to conditional access, if any of the conditional access policies has been applied to this particular sign-in log, it will show. And also if there are any report only conditional access policies, it will show as well. So this is just to give you a demo of how in detail and how centralized all the information of an identity is in the Microsoft Entra control plane. So that's just the demo. And on to the other one. Right. Let's talk about zero trust. Who has heard about zero trust? What is zero trust? Is it a product? Is it a concept? Is it like a security model or whatever it is? Like who has heard of zero trust? Anyone? So by assumption, most of us think that zero trust is a technology or product like conditional access or privileged identity management. It is not. So zero trust is actually uh, it is a security operating model, a concept built on theories or three main concepts. One being verify explicitly, the second being use least privilege, and the third being assume breach. So what we should understand is how these three theories differentiate from each other. Let's say, for an example, verify explicitly. So the takeaway from is who is signing in, right? So previously, back in the day, if the username and the password was provided, it was categorized as a successful login. Only the password was considered to be correct, and that is categorized as successful authentication. But in the modern ecosystem, that is not the case. You should use multiple signals or use multiple signals to verify this is actually a legitimate login attempt. So you use signals like who the user is, if the user is a correct user, if the device is compliant or not, if the user is accessing from an approved location or not, or if or what kind of application the user is trying to access. Is it just an enterprise application, an app registration, or is it like an admin portal? And also the risk factor, like is the user that is trying to log in is an already existing risk user or someone who has a risky sign in. So that is verify explicitly. I'll give you an example. So this is a very simple question. Assume someone from Sydney logs in to his account from a compliant corporate device, and all of a sudden you have another login coming from a non-compliant device from Russia at the same time. Just because the user or the person who logs in from Russia use the correct password, should that be considered as a successful login? Should we? No, because obviously it's impossible for someone to be in Australia and Russia at the same time. So that is categorized as an impossible travel or an atypical location in security terms. So as long as you have an understanding, um, like we should not consider the password as the only valid signal, which is why zero trust controls uses all these signals to explicitly verify how a user is authenticated. And the second one is use least privilege. The takeaway from this is what can they access? So a user should only be allowed to access what they need and only when they need, not forever. A forever should not be a scenario or a situation in the current ecosystem. Let's say, for an example, if someone needs exchange admin access for a project or some work, do you just go ahead and grant permanent access for the user? No, because if the work requires 2 hours of work, 4 hours of work, or only for 2 days, you just grant access for 2 days, like just enough access. So Microsoft controls like just-in-time access, privilege identity management, and access reviews is when it comes in play for when it comes to use least privilege. And the last one is assume breach. So when it comes to assume breach, we do not expect all the controls that we have in place to fail, but we work under the assumption that whatever the controls we have will somehow, someday gets compromised. So when we say assume breach, we should have controls in place to reduce the blast radius or to have damage control. We can't guarantee that it will never be breached. We can't have controls assuming it will never be breached. We should be under the assumption it will be breached someday, somehow. But if it gets breached, we have damage control or we have measures in place to reduce the blast radius. So like the quote says at the bottom, instead of trust forever, it should be trusted for now. So that is the whole picture behind the zero trust concept. And then we move on to Microsoft Entra ID. So yes, zero trust concept is all good and nice. It sounds nice, but this is where all the action takes place. There should be a method or a way to apply these the concepts or the theories of zero trust. So Microsoft Entra ID, like we checked in the demo, is where all the signals or all the information is gathered in a centralized place. That is the control plane. So in Microsoft Entra ID, you have your users and administrators. So you have your external users, guest users, contractors, and partners. And you have your devices, all kinds of devices, and the compliance state, whether the device is compliant or non-compliant. And then you also have all kinds of enterprise apps, app registrations, and also workload identities like AI agents and automation accounts as well. So all these signals gets pushed towards the Microsoft Entra ID, and on the left are the components, and Microsoft Entra ID controls it. And on the right-hand side is the controls we have over all these entities or identities. So what we should apply or what we should have on these identities is that we should have strong authentication. Make sure we have strong authentication on all kinds of identities. And also, not only we have strong authentication, we should periodically evaluate the risk signals, see the risk sign-ins, check the risk users, and also enforce conditional access policies, which we'll be checking in the next slide, because conditional access policies is like the heartbeat of all these controls where the security controls are being placed. And also we govern access life cycle. We should have processes or we should have methods how these controls or permissions or everything is controlled or governed. And also finally, we should limit privilege access. Just because someone asks for global admin permissions, you shouldn't be granting it. You, as an organization, should review what the requirement is and for how long the user is required, and then grant the privilege access. So that is why we should limit the privilege access. So Microsoft Entra ID decides who gets access to what and under what condition and for how long. It should never be forever. So who has worked with conditional access policies? Who has configured or who has an idea of what the conditional access policy is? Can I know what the conditional access policy is? Yeah, so geo restriction is one of the conditional access policies. So my question is, what does a conditional access policy do to your Microsoft network or Microsoft ecosystem? Hmm. Yeah, correct. That's an accurate answer. So, like I said previously, Microsoft Entra ID is your control plane where everything is controlled, and the conditional access policies are the heart of it, or like it's the engine. So it's the place or it's the component which drives these decisions or applies these controls, all kind of controls over it. So um, I've, I've, I've broken it down to three easy parts just to give you an understanding how a conditional access policy works. So it works on if, then, and the outcome. So if, or the condition is, which I'll show in the demo for you to understand a little bit better. So the if condition is if it's a user or if it's an admin role, if it is applied to all users, or if it is only applied to a certain group of users, or it can just be a single user as well, or is it applied to an admin role or multiple admin roles. That's the if when it comes to users or role. And the other if is what the application or the resource is. If you are familiar with conditional access policies, you can apply a CA policy to all cloud apps, or you can target specific apps like an enterprise app or an app registration, or it could be an admin portal as well. And then the other if is the device state. Is the device compliant or is the device non-compliant? And the location. Location is something very important now because many organizations have geo restrictions like he mentioned. So the other if is the if or is the location from an approved location, or is this from not approved location? And the risk level, if the risk is high, medium, or low. And after those ifs, then comes the action. So we figure out what the if is, and then comes the action. So based on this condition, if you either allow access, you either block access, or you can ask the action to be to provide MFA, or you can have the action to have a compliant device, or you can have the action set to provide phishing resistant MFA. And you can also apply session controls like to not have a persistent browser connection, or have a sign-in frequency, or a timeout of like 2 hours or 4 hours for admin portals, for an example. So that is the action. And then comes the outcome. So how does it provide a business value? So after the if, and then what happens after? So what this helps is it helps you give adaptive access, as in access to what is only required, not for everything. So with conditional access policies, you can control who or what has access to what time period, and so much of controls, and reduce the blast radius. So like I said, this helps in damage control as well in case if a compromise happens, and also better user experience as well. So with conditional access policies, you can um, give the user or the user just what they need as well, with a better user experience. And also auditability. Auditability is to have audit logs. So if someone makes conditional access policy changes, you can have audit logs on the conditional access policies as well. We do not make CA policy changes just for the sake of it. We should monitor and govern those CA policy audits as well, and also control exceptions. So in organizations, there could be a scenario where you are required to exclude a certain user or an application or device from a conditional access policy. Let's say, for an example, we have a geo restriction policy where only users from Sri Lanka is supposed to log into your Microsoft 365 tenant. Fair enough, that's pretty straightforward. Let's say, for an example, your CEO is supposed to travel to, let's say, India. And do we just tell the CEO, look, we have a geo restriction in place. You won't be able to access the office resources while you're in India. Is that the approach that we take? What do we do then? Yeah, we have exceptions. We have exclusions for that reason. So in this particular scenario, do you just exclude the CEO from the policy and rub your hands and say, my work is done? Is that the best practice? So in theory, it works, yes. When the CEO is excluded from that policy, he can access the office resources from India, but not just from India. He can access from Japan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, whatever the country. And at the same time, for your bad luck, if someone tries to access his account or compromises his account from somewhere like South Africa or Russia, is that like, is the straightforward exclusion the best practice? Then what do we do? Sorry? Okay, yeah. So we can scope it down to create another conditional access policy where we have India as the only approved country and include the CEO for that particular conditional access policy. So it only gets applied to him, so not everyone else. So likewise, with conditional access policies, you can have variation of controls, but at the same time, control exceptions as well. Excluding a user or a resource or a device is not the solution, but we should do it in a controlled manner where, like I mentioned, the blast radius is reduced. If something goes wrong, your damage control is already there in place. Right, so let's see how we can create a conditional access policy. You go to your Microsoft Entra portal and you select conditional access and you have your policies. So this is a demo tenant and these are some conditional access policies I created from scratch from templates. Another question for you guys. Give me maybe three most important or three more critical conditional access policies an organization should have, a production environment should have. Name me three conditional access policies. Anyone from this side? MFA? For whom? For all users. Okay. So MFA for all users is a very obvious CA policy. Give me two more examples. Which you think are very important conditional access. Sorry? Device compliance, yes. So can you tell me what that policy does? Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, true, true. That is also correct. I'll come back on that. Okay. Compliant devices is also another CA policy. What one more? Sorry? Password? Password protection is correct, but we could think of more important conditional access policies. Yeah, geo restriction. So it's not like per se those are the only three, but those are usually three important conditional access policies that you find in a production environment. So when it comes to device compliance, yes, we can set up a compliance policy where the jailbroken devices, the routed devices are blocked or marked as non-compliant, and we can set the OS version if you have like an older iOS or an Android version to be blocked. So from that policy, what happens is if you are to connect to an Office resource, the device should be a compliant device. You just can't log into your Office 365, Microsoft 365 with a device that you find in the cafe or the coffee shop or your personal device. So it should always be a compliant device. So that's just an overview of what the important conditional access policies could be. When it comes to conditional access policies, you can create them in two ways, I would say. One is you can click on new policy and create a new policy from scratch, or else you can create conditional access policies from Microsoft templates. So I'll select that one for this demo. And once you create the new policy from templates, it will have all kinds of categories: secure foundation, the CA policies that falls under zero trust, CA policies that falls under remote work, CA policies that falls under all these categories. And if you come into the all category, it will have all the templates. That doesn't mean these are the only conditional access policies that you can create in a Microsoft tenant. This only means that these are the ready-made or available templates in a tenant, but you can create all kinds of custom ones if you just select create a policy. But for this demo purpose, I'll just select require multi-factor authentication for Azure management and click on select or review. It will have the policy name. If your organization have a custom naming convention for conditional access policies, you can change the name as well. It's usually best practice when you create a conditional access policy to report only, because it's always good to review a conditional access policy before you turn it on. So what off does is it's turned off, nothing happens. Turned on means the conditional access policy is active. Report only is that the information gets logged. Let's say, for an example, if someone tries to sign into the Azure portal without MFA, if the policy is turned off, nothing will get detected. But if it's set to report only, that event or that sign-in will get logged under the report only category under the conditional access policy. So included all users, exclude users, that's fine. And if you see, the scope is to only the Microsoft Azure Management Cloud app. And what does the access control do? Grant access if you have multi-factor authentication. I'll just create it. Just go view or edit. Take a few seconds. Select one of these. Just want to show you how the if then conditions work on the conditional access policies. As usual, it's taking a few seconds to load. Try opening this up. Go classic refresh. Right, yeah, the refresh works as usual. So remember how we had the if condition and then condition and then the outcome. So this particular conditional access policy is also an important one, whereas you have to have multi-factor authentication enabled for administrators. So if you click on to whom this is applied, this is not for all users. This is selected by directory roles. So Microsoft by default selects 14 admin roles as the critical admin roles, Whereas if someone who has this particular admin role assigned to them should trigger the MFA prompt. So that doesn't mean you can't add any additional ones, but the already marked ones are like the most important ones. But if there's a requirement within your organization that certain other admin accounts also should have MFA, you can easily go in. And then we see what it's targeted to, all resources. Doesn't matter whether he access any cloud app, it has to prompt for MFA, and network, nothing is configured. But this is where we can configure if the user or if the admin logs in from a trusted network, you can have no MFA prompted and such controls. And also under conditions, you have several other controls as well. So that is the if, to find who is accessing and what is he accessing. And then the access control. Then what do we do? If the user is an admin role and tries to access cloud apps, what this conditional access policy requires is require multi-factor authentication. So what this does, it will ask for multi-factor authentication. Let's say, for an example, the organizational security policy needs you to have MFA and only allow administrators to use a compliant device. What do we select here? They should have MFA and they should use a compliant device as well. An administrator cannot use a personal device. That is the organizational security posture. What do we select here? Can we do multiple controls here or just one control? Can we? Can we? Yes, so in that case, what do we select here? Yeah, we can select require device to be marked as compliant. And also we should make sure it should be selected to require all selected controls, not just require one of the selected controls. So what happens here is, let's say for an example, we only select require one of the selected controls. What it does is it checks either if the admin is supposed to provide MFA or either the device is marked as compliant. If we have it set to select one of the controls, would it check for both? Does it check for both? Obviously not. So we have to select require all of the selected controls to make sure both these tick boxes are being checked or both these conditions are met. So that is the grant or the then condition. And if you go into session, this is where I mentioned before, the sign-in frequency. This is something that we as a practice do in the modern Microsoft security ecosystem, whereas the admin control or the admin session should not be continuous for more than the X number of hours. As a practice, what we do is we set it to just 2 hours. An admin session will only be active or continuous for 2 hours. Imagine, or is it safe for an admin account to have continuous session without any control? Not at all. So this is something important that we should practice in our day-to-day environments. And also something we do as a practice is not have persistent browser sessions. What is a persistent browser session? If we did not select, and let's say for an example, an administrator logs in, closes the browser, opens the browser next time, he can access the whatever the admin control panel that he wants. But if we select here, not persistent, never persistent, if the user or if the admin closes the browser, the session gets cancelled, the session ends. If the user wants to access the Entra admin or whatever the admin portal, he has to authenticate again. So this is also an important security measure or security control we have placed in terms of session. So once you meet all these conditions or configure all these conditions, if you are confident that you have selected your if and then conditions properly, you can turn this on. And by default, it will ask whether you want to be excluded from this particular conditional access policy. If you feel like you don't want to, most of the time you don't want to be excluded from any of these policies, you can just click on save and turn back on. So simple as that. So that is just to give you an idea how a conditional access policy works. Yep. Yeah. Yes. So unfortunately, I won't be able to show you, but I'll show you where you can find it. So let's say Alex is an admin, and under sign-in logs, if you check his sign-in log, and it should be under conditional access, and it would show whether it's fault or not, like if it succeeded or failed. And under report only, you will see this particular conditional access policy being applied. Let's say, for an example, Alex tried to log into the Azure portal in that particular scenario and failed MFA. It would be logged here as an entry with the conditional access policy name, and it will say whether it failed or not, and you can view all that information. So report only is usually done for auditing purposes or to monitor how the behavior would go. Like, let's say, for an example, something common that I said to report only in production environments is the legacy applications. So one of the important conditional access policies that we also deploy is block legacy authentication, like SMTP and all those old protocols. A customer might not be aware if they are actually using any legacy authentication anymore. What do we do? Let's make it a straightforward question. Do we just take his word and just block legacy authentication altogether? Or do we do like a trial, set the conditional access policy to report only to find if there are actually still any legacy applications or protocols being used? What do we do? Do we just set it to turn on? No, we should set to report only. The security controls are in place for security, yes, but it should not be a hindrance or an interruption to a client's production environment as well. Let's say, for an example, their business critical information or their ERP system or the finance system was using a legacy authentication protocol. We as security people, we just go ahead and turn on the policy, and they can't do their work. What would they pick? Would they want the security in place, or would they want to get their work done? Obviously, they want to get their work done. So whatever the security measures that we have in place should be applied in a controlled manner, not just because we like it or that's the way we do it. It should be in a controlled manner that it does not interrupt the production environment as well. So that was just an overview of how a conditional access policies work, what the best practices are. I mean, you can go hours and hours on conditional access policies, something that I really like. I wish I could do a session on conditional access policies alone. So let's see. Hopefully, if I get a chance in the future, I would love to do a session alone on the conditional access policies itself. Let's move on to the slides. Right. Let's see about some identity attack scenarios. So these are very common identity attack scenarios that you have. You have password spray, you have MFA fatigue, you have token theft, which is pretty advanced, and you have rogue admins as well. So can any of you give me a briefing of, let's just pick one and give what it means? Anyone? What does password spray mean? or what actually happens behind the scenes. So password spray, when you spray, it just spreads. So what the attackers do in password spray is they try very simple basic passwords like welcome01, password123, Colombo01, or your company name, and all the simple stuff, and see any of those passwords actually work on these users. They do not target one particular user, they target like a whole lot of users at once. So to avoid such scenarios, or the security controls you have in place to mitigate or avoid such scenarios, is smart lockout. Is anyone familiar with smart lockout? Yeah, so with smart lockout, we can define passwords that should not be or cannot be used by users. Like if I get a chance, I'll show how smart lockout works. And you have risk signals, and obviously you have MFA and conditional access policies as well. And then there's MFA fatigue. What does MFA fatigue means? So if I give an example, a user somehow gets access to your username and the password, but the user can't get into your account without MFA. So what does he or she do? Enters the password, prompts for MFA, and if a random user sees, you get a prompt for MFA once, get twice, and the third time. Eventually, a normal user who is not much aware of security would be like, what the hell is this? Like, what is this? Like, just to stop it, just for the sake of it, out of exhaustion, they would just click yes, just to stop the notification, because they would not know what this signal is or what this authentication is. Just by getting tired, they would just click yes, and they would not have an idea what's happening in the background. Maybe they'll find in a few hours later or a few days later and report it to IT. So to control such scenarios, we have number matching. Rather than clicking yes or no, you have a number matching system where you have to either select a number, or you can type a number that comes on the screen just to provide authentication. So when controls are like that in place, it avoids such scenarios like MFA fatigue. And there's authentication strength, and there are pass keys like FIDO2 keys as well, which we can avoid such scenarios. And then there's token theft, which is uh, very dangerous. So what happens is, in those particular two scenarios, the MFA didn't work out. But what happens in token theft is, you have your MFA completed, and once the MFA is completed, you have a valid session token with your authentication. So if someone gets hold of this token, they can use that token as a valid user session. They can be, I mean, it can be used as you're actually using them. So to avoid, I mean, I've had an experience where a client had their session token stolen, and the compromiser or the attacker had done all kinds of things. So then, to avoid such situations, we have session controls. Session controls is not have persistent browser sessions or have timeouts in your sessions. So that avoids session tokens. Let's say, for an example, if you have an idle session timeout of 30 minutes, which we usually set. After 30 minutes, if your session is idle, you are signed out. So if you are signed out, this session token will not be valid anymore. So that's why we have all kinds of controls in place, like session controls, and reassess whoever has access admin controls and stuff. And the last one is rogue admin. So rogue admin is not necessarily about a malicious administrator or an attacker. So it could be something like an already compromised account, or it could be something like an admin account that has been there for years. Like, someone must have done a project with global administrator permissions in your tenant, but no one knows who handles it now. No one knows why it was used for. You just know that global admin permissions for this account is just there for years. So I have personally seen organizations have like 7 to 8 global admins, whereas 3 or 4 of those are not in use anymore. They do not even know why it was used in the first place. Yes, they know it was used for a project, but the access is just continuous. Like they would not even know if someone had accessed their account. They have no auditing or governance in place. So rogue admins are where those are like stale admin accounts, the admin controls or permissions that has been granted for months or years. So to mitigate or address these kind of attacks or rogue admins, we have controls like PIM, privilege identity management, whereas we can limit the number of time whereas a particular user has access to that particular admin role. It could be hours, it could be days, etc. And we have approval processes, and we have just-in-time access and access reviews and stuff. So these controls remove the possibility of an unknown person or someone who doesn't use admin controls or have admin accounts without using it for months and months. Right. Let me show you what the risky sign-ins are. So we checked on the sign-in logs, and something else that we should continuously keep an eye on is the ID protection. Whereas you have your risk users, this obviously does not have much data since it's a tenant, but in your production environment or in your organization's environment, you should keep an eye and govern of these risk users, and you will have uh, unauthorized attempts or users or accounts that has been marked as unsafe, and you will have risky sign-ins as well. And as a practice, let's say for an example, you get an alert saying that X user's account was marked as a risk user. Obviously, must be because of someone trying to access from a different geographical location. As IT engineers or as security personnel, just for me to get an idea, what would be the best practice or what would you do in that scenario? Let's say it's the CEO of your company. The CEO of your company gets marked as a risky user and his access gets blocked. What do you do? Yes, first would be to change the password and to kill any active sessions and reach out to the CEO asking whether they have legitimately made an attempt to access from this location and all this information. And yeah, just take him through the next steps on providing the new passwords and all this basic stuff. So that is one of the scenarios that could be. Something hilarious that I came across was in one of the client environments, a user was detected as a risky signing, and he was a regular user logging from Australia, and he was detected as a risky sign-in because he was logged in from India, and the user is from India. And the reason why he was using a VPN to watch cricket. So he was using VPN to watch cricket using India, and the help desk guys were in panic, thinking it's a legitimate login attempt, but to see it was actually him trying to watch cricket matches using an Indian VPN. So yeah, you get all kinds of scenarios and funny incidents like that in production environments as well. But the point I want to highlight here is verify. Just don't work under assumptions. Just verify from the user. Reach out to the user. Ask what happened. Like the user may be aware. Like in this scenario, maybe he was actually using a VPN, but in certain scenarios, most of the time it's actually someone who's attacking that account, who has tried to access this particular user's account. So that's about risky sign-ins. So and something new that has come in is risky agents as well. This is for AI agents, co-pilot agents, and all these workloads. So this is somewhere that most of you guys, if you are working in production environments, will have to come in the future, because AI agents and co-pilot agents, the unauthorized or troublesome ones, are causing a lot of problems for in terms of security as well. Right. So let's take a look at what the identity ecosystem is. Um, um, so the security ecosystem, when we say identity, the first thing that comes to our mind is just human users. And it's not just the human users who are considered as identities. So if you take human identities, you have employees, you have admins, you have contractors, and all kinds of external user, internal users as well. So the Microsoft measure to mitigate is you have MFA, you have conditional access policies, and you have access reviews. And there's external identities. You have guests, you have vendors, you have partners. To control these identities, you have stuff like B2B governance, you have access reviews and terms as well. And the third type is workload identities. So workload identities are your app registrations, your enterprise apps, your automation accounts. How do we control or govern the workload identities? Workload identities are automated ones, like they are not human. So as best practice, what we do is we should periodically assess these accounts, and we should rotate this password and make sure that these applications have least privilege, only um, uh, enough access to those applications, and also make sure all these applications or enterprise application or app registrations has owners, because we should not leave an application with high privileges without knowing who the owner is. I've personally had an experience where a new client that we onboarded, we found out there were like 5 to 6 applications with very high privileges, like read write to mailbox, read write user, read write to calendar. But when you reach out to the key contact, he has no idea who installed it, who owns it, or even who even uses it. So if the access is not required, or we are not sure why the access is required, it is not an access that is required anymore. We should straight away take it off. And then you have device identities. You have your Windows desktop, laptops, your Mac OS devices, iOS devices, your bring your own devices. So to control these device identities, we have Intune compliance, like I explained previously, and we can control these identities through conditional access policy controls as well. And lastly, the biggest headache, AI and agents identity. So you have your co-pilot agents, your connectors, your plugins, you name what not. You have all kind of AI and agent identities in your tenant. So how do we control this? Through governance, have policies in place, how these are being handled or being deployed, and have life cycle to these agents and identities, and have access boundaries as well. Right. Identity governance and least privilege. So, like I said, if there is to be an access to a user, an application, or a device, it should have an owner, it should have a reason, and also it should have an expiry. It should not be permanent at all. So if you are into governance, so what is governance? I keep saying governance, governance. It is an important factor. What is governance? Yeah, governance is control. So governance is it's a system or a set of rules or practices or processes decided by a group of people within an organization to meet a particular end goal. So the governance should be there in place for security. So these governance questions in this example would be, who has global admin? I've seen organizations with the size of 50, 60 users have 7 to 8 global admins. Is that even necessary? Like Microsoft says the best practice would be to maybe have 2 or maximum 3. So excess amount of global admins just does not make sense at all. And who approved the access? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that is why we should review them as well. When was it last reviewed? So as organizations, it's best practice to have periodical reviews of your admin accounts. It could be a monthly review or it could be a quarterly review. It could be maybe at worst 6-month review, but it should never be never reviewed. It should always be reviewed just to make sure the correct people have correct access. And also, is the access still needed? Just because someone needed an admin role, let's say for an example, a project engineer needed global administrator to do some project or an integration which required global admin. But does that mean he should have admin control forever, even after the project is finished? Not at all. So once the project is finished, or whatever the work is done, the admin permissions or role should be taken off. What happens when someone leaves? As an organization, the other governance control you should have is if the organization has a proper offboarding process, if the organization has a proper user exit process, are the groups being removed, are the license being removed, are the admin roles being monitored and then removed as well. So if an organization does not have proper offboarding process, that's a big red flag. So it doesn't make sense for someone who's not in your organization or active to even have sign-in permission. So sign-in should be blocked altogether. But I have seen organizations where the users have left like months ago. They even have admin permissions on their accounts, not blocked, no password change, nothing. The group still exists. So this is where governance is very important. So yes, we ask all the questions. Yes, that's right. How does Entra help the governance side of things? You have privileged identity management, PIM, which we will check in a while. You have access reviews, you have entitlement management, you have life cycle workflows, and break glass monitoring. Can someone tell me what a break glass account is? What is a break glass account? Have you guys never used the break glass account? Sorry? Yes, break glass account is in best practice is an emergency account. So let's say for an example, you work for an organization called abc.com, right? So as best practice, we don't create the break glass account with the domain name abc.com. Let's say for an example, the domain is down, right? You have no access whatsoever. If so, you only have one global admin account and it uses that particular domain. Can you access it? No. So that is why we create a break glass account, which is an emergency account with the domain name abc.onmicrosoft.com. So there is no way the onmicrosoft.com domain would be inactive or down. So you use that particular account in case if something emergency goes off. And also you have to have at least a 25 character password, and you in practice you should exclude MFA from that account, and you should exclude geo restrictions from that account, and you most importantly should have audit controls or monitoring on that account. Just because you have a break glass account doesn't mean you should always use it. You should only use in particular incidents or scenarios. So that is an important control that Entra has. Let me quickly go through privilege identity management. Right. Rules and admins. Right. Right. Let's say I want to assign a user global admin. Right. So I go to add assignments and I select a user. Let's select Adele in this example. So the role is right, membership is right, select next. So if I select eligible, the user has to log in to that particular account to have the admin controls enabled. But as best practice, does it make sense to have it permanently eligible? No. What we do in PIM is you can select a date and a time where the assignment starts and ends. So let's say by default or like the maximum PIM allows you to assign it is for a year, but maybe for this example, let's just select a random date and a time as well. So if I select this and assign, it will assign the admin or have admin permissions for Adele for this particular time period. But if, say, for an example, you don't want the user to go to a portal and select activate, you can straight away just select active. So straight away, he or she would have the admin permissions on her account. But if you do permanently assign, you should do a justification as well. So in this case, let me select eligible. Let me try to access the account as Adele. Are we good with the time? Can I continue? Okay. Let's just we hope the password is correct. Let's just select yes for this example. Set up MFA. This is a good practical example of setting up MFA as well. Let's do it right here. Next. Yeah, this is the number matching. It cannot allow MFA exhaustion for us because we have to type the number. Looks good. Okay, done. So I just want to show you how an admin with PIM admin controls is being given access. So now this is Adele, who's logged into her account, and she was given global admin permissions. But as of now, her global admin permissions are not active. How do we find it out? Let's just maximize the screen. Right. Ideally, if you come to conditional access, if you are a global admin, yeah, you see, you don't have access. But didn't we just grant her access or global admin permissions? Why doesn't it work? Yeah, so we have to activate it through privilege identity management. Select privilege identity management. This is the interface. So if you click on my roles, it should show the admin permission or the admin role that we granted to Adele. You see, global administrator has been granted, and we activate. So it will take a few seconds to validate the request. So you can go up to 8 hours per session, up until the specific date that we set for her. Let's say demo and activate. So it will go through a process of activating your role, validating if the activation is successful, and yeah, it will take like 30 seconds for you to activate this role. So this eliminates of organizations having permanent administrators, or this only allows admins to have access to specific resources to specific time periods on only what they need. And now, once the role is activated, she should ideally have all the admin controls now. She is now a global administrator. To check this, let's try to go into conditional access and see if it's activated. Yep, looks good. So that is just a demo on how PIM is managed. So you have, as an admin, if someone requests access, you have your approve request, your review access, and also your audit history as well. So if you have approved previously for certain users in the past, it will show the logs for your approvals as well. So that's privilege identity management. So what does the future look like? Future is passwordless. I believe Microsoft are making pass keys or FIDO keys as the default authentication methods for admin roles. I'm not sure whether it's just global admins or admin roles. Um, so that's one of the measures. And we use Windows Hello for Business. We just type in a PIN code rather than the password to log in, and we have authentication strengths as well. So if anyone hasn't seen, this is a FIDO key. So this works on a public key encryption. So when we register this FIDO key, the public key goes to the website, the private key is stored in this FIDO key, and when you want to authenticate, you just use your USB-C port to insert this device, and you just type a code and touch this part in the middle, and it gets authenticated. So this is a phishing resistant method. So FIDO keys are a phishing resistant MFA method. So just pass along and just make sure it comes back to me just to check the FIDO key. And AI access, you have your Copilot and agents, your plugins and connectors, and it has major data expose risk as well. So for AI access, like I mentioned, you should have controls and a lot of governance around those agents and integrations as well. And lastly, continuous control. Doesn't matter whatever you do as practice, You need to have your risk-based access. You have to have your sessions reassessed. Make sure your devices are compliant and make sure there's lifecycle control over it as well. So we have pretty much come towards the end of the session. So from what we discussed, yeah, I'm sorry the session took longer than expected. So the key points that we are to take away from this session is identity is the new perimeter. I can't emphasize you how important identity security is. So I hope that you got an insight or information of why the identity security is very important. Identity is the new perimeter. If identity falls, your whole stack becomes exposed. Trust must be earned continuously. Just because you have MFA once doesn't mean you should not have continuous verification. You should have controls in place like session controls and stuff that we discussed. And the third one, conditional access is the policy engine. That is the heartbeat of Microsoft Entra and where all these zero trust um, controls come into place. So yeah, like I mentioned, I would love to do a session just on conditional access policies alone, which is very interesting for me from the day I came across conditional access policies. So yeah, I'm happy to do a session separately on conditional access policies in the future as well. So yeah, and the fourth one, governance reduces blast radius. So as an organization, you should have your processes, your practices, or the correct controls in place. So just because you have them in place doesn't mean it will guarantee you 100% security, but it will at least reduce the blast radius or have damage control in case something gets compromised. And the last one is Entra ID is the control plane. So Entra is where all the action take place. You saw all kinds of identities in Microsoft Entra, your user accounts, devices, agents, and whatnot, you name it. So those are the key takeaways from this session. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions or anything that you want to discuss or any other thing. I would happy to answer if there's any. Yeah, thank you. Huh? Okay. Any questions, guys? Anything to discuss? Anything that you are unclear on this session that we had, or any doubts that you have had on the session? Yeah, so sign-in logs. Um, if you talk about, let's say for an example, um, you have a security product, like a third-party security product, okay? So as an organization, you need sign-in logs from that application as well. Unless we integrate the application and the sign-in logs together, you won't see the third-party application or that particular application sign-in logs. So there has to be an integration in place if you want any other custom application sign-in logs or audit logs or whatever to come through, like go both sides. So that is one. But if not, anything that the user connects to, it will display like any context or whatever the information that you have. But if you specifically want from custom applications, there has to be an integration done with the Entra. So you have to have a connector in between the application and Entra. Sorry? Yes, it can be done through enterprise apps as well, but it can be done through app registrations as well. But somehow or the other, there has to be some sort of connection or like an integration from the application. So that will give you logs from that particular application as well. Any other questions, guys? Yep, I think we've taken way longer than expected, but yeah, yeah. Again, never trust, always verify should be the motto for us all Microsoft personnel. And yeah, thank you very much for attending the session. It's a pleasure to have you and share my knowledge with you. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Sheik, for joining with us and sharing your knowledge. And the session was actually okay. The session was really interesting, and I hope everyone learned a lot from the session. So I would like to invite everyone to join with us in future sessions as well. So thank you guys for joining. And once again, thank you, Mr. Sheikh.
Yep.
I invite you as well for future sessions as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.